for people who have known me for a long time, we would gather when I was living in Los Angeles in my living room, and we would do this almost as an exercise. We were looking to um, how we can see the world in different ways. And when we did this all these years ago, it was a fun thing to do. The world was not, the world was changing, but it was not as crazy or as intense as it seems right now. And so we would just kind of go on this exploration. We would take different topics and just kind of look to see what it looked like out there and at what point things changed. So it's kind of like watching the horizon. If we had if we were on the beach and we had this beautiful view of a sunset, and you're watching the horizon and you're watching it and you're seeing how and when it might change and how the colors change, and you're still seeing the sun, and then eventually it changes. So we would look for these points at which it would really change, and we would do that with different subjects, and it was a great exercise to do. Now, when we look at things with a little bit more scrutiny, a little bit more intensity, and it's not just for fun. In some ways, when we look at things now, it's serious. We want an answer, and we want to know things are going to work out because of all the challenges that we're facing now. And yet, the way to do this is the same way we did back then. You just look. You look to see what you see and what is revealed to you, what is shown to you. What does the sunset look like today? What does daybreak or sunrise look like tomorrow? And you look at it that way, understanding that every day is different, that there's no two sunsets that are ever going to be the same, that we see each day in a unique and different way. And when we look at things that way, we actually see much more, because we're not looking for a fixed result. And we're not looking at things saying, oh, it better turn out this way, because otherwise we're in real trouble. Or if that happens, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so when we have too much of a fixed idea of an outcome of how it has to be, what we're seeing is colored by our mind, by need, in Buddhism we would call that grasping. It has to be that way or my life isn't going to turn out. And then it's not as reliable. What we're seeing and just visioning becomes less reliable and becomes much more a factor of desire, or something that has to happen in a certain way. So today we're just looking. We're just seeing what we're gonna what is coming up, and without a projected outcome. And that allows us to also infuse our days with creativity and with intent and with all these things that allow us to, as much as possible, shape our future, but not demand that it be a certain way, and not be as fearful as how it will turn out. Somehow things turn out. Somehow we get through difficult moments. Somehow disasters are averted, or somehow we get through disasters until it's not a disaster anymore. Sometimes we do that really easily and gracefully, and sometimes not, in not so pretty ways. And so we're going to have a combination of all of that. So just as an introduction, that's what we'll be doing today. And I'll probably do these a couple times a year, the way I used to do. We'll do that. So we'll spend about an hour or an hour and a half together today at about the 45-minute mark or so. We'll take a 5-minute break, bathroom break, or something to drink, or whatever you need to do. And probably just before each segment, since we'll do 2 segments, we'll have a short question and answer for you as well. I want to give thanks for my friend, my dearest friend and colleague, Pablo, who is here from my dearest friend, and he currently lives in Peru, so he's joining us from Peru, and we chat as often as we can. We compare notes as colleagues. We do everything together. We laugh and cry together and look at the world together, and he's also an excellent teacher in his own right, and because he's known me so long, he helps me out with some of these tech things as well, which is definitely not my specialty or favorite thing to do. So thank you to Pablo, and he'll be helping you with questions and things like that when it's time for that as well. You can check in with him. So another question I received, in case you have to leave early today, will this be recorded? Yes, it'll be recorded, and it'll later on, it'll be on Facebook, it'll be on YouTube, and I'm not sure if the whole thing will be there together or if we'll break it up into a couple of segments or whatever, but yes, it'll be recorded. And let's see, what else should we start at? So let's start by saying that the world is at a crisis point right now. The world is really at a crisis. And if we look at really what a crisis is, it's really a time when difficult or important decisions need to be made. A crisis doesn't mean that everything is imminently going to fall apart or unravel completely. It just means it's at the point where you can't overlook it, you can't ignore it. You have walked right into it, and you're standing on the X. And as a world, as a community, as a humanity, as a species, we are standing on that X right now. And it maybe didn't look that way when we first kind of stumbled our way into this COVID moment, when it looked like, you know, here's a virus that's happening over there in this other country, and then, oh look, now it's coming over here, and then it kind of slowly starting to take things over. And at a certain point, it reached that crisis point where no one could ignore it. Many, many years ago, someone, a teacher of mine from a lot of years ago, told me that there would come a time when every single person at the same time, just about, would be invited was a nice word, to look at themselves and look at the world in a new way. And that seemed so odd at the time, because it didn't seem, you know, it seems like we're like popcorn. We're popping at different times. And when someone's going inward, someone else is going outward. And when one country is up, another one is down. And the same thing with generations and economies. And it was hard for me to imagine that all this could happen at the same time. And this teacher of mine, you know, teachers don't usually do this, but they guaranteed it. This is happening. This is definitely happening. And you'll know it when it does. Every single person will know it when it does. And so when this moment reached that point where, you know, okay, this is not going away, it's not getting better, and we're all looking at the same subject, and it's affecting every single thing in every part of the world, I remembered what he had said, and that this is that time. So we could call this more of a threshold. And at first, maybe like you, I also thought, you know, it's a moment, it's a pandemic, it's a challenge, it's a worldwide challenge, and then we'll go back to normal. And then maybe like you, I also thought, well, okay, we won't go back to normal, but there will be a new normal. And then I went beyond that as well. And so now I don't think that there is a normal or one that we're returning to or a new normal. There is just going to be next moments, next thresholds, next chapters, some shorter than others, some really quick thresholds that we cross through, some little bit longer moments. And the most that we can do, the best that we can do as we go through some of these is, as you hear other people say as well, to stay awake, not to fall asleep in these moments, not to become complacent. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean that we need to be on high alert every moment for every single thing that happens and how it's going to affect us personally. But having that awareness that this is a specific and unique time that is designed to increase our awareness, to increase our sensitivity to our environment, to each other, to the ending of a certain era, ways of thinking, ways of studying, and the beginning of others, the more we can stay awake for that, through that, the more that we will know and be better able to adapt. It seems like a given to say, well, of course we're going to stay awake. Of course there's so much going on, and I watch the news and I pay attention, and of course, I wouldn't. But something happens to us as humans when we become overwhelmed by so much. I mean, think of a project that you have attempted at times, and you're doing it and you're doing it, and as long as it's going well a little at a time, you are accomplishing something. But then possibly something else happens in your life, a really big thing, and you have to attend to that and keep your project going. And then maybe your project is not going as well. And eventually, if we become too overwhelmed, our brains, our minds, the way they're wired, they just begin to turn off some receptors and keep others turned on. We do what we need to do to keep the lights turned on, right? So in our own minds and lives, without being completely alerted to that, some of the important receptors that are new, that are not yet practiced, that are not yet evolved into this new world that we're coming into, our bodies, our minds will begin to shut those down first. They're not necessary yet. They're not fully engaged yet. There's a crisis to be dealt with. And so we fall back into old mind, old pattern, old belief systems, old family patterns, all of those things without even realizing that. And we backslide a little bit. And so as much as I say, of course, I'm going to stay awake and be aware, I can tell you for sure that as much as I do this, that I don't do it well all the time. And I have to remind myself of that. And there's certain techniques and practices that I do to bring myself back into a centered place so that I can continue to look at these things. So when we are in too much fear, it is easier to fall asleep. And there's lots of other things that contribute to it as well. And by sleep, I kind of mean this kind of haze. It's not really like sleep. It's a kind of a hazy, non-conscious, yeah, I'm kind of paying attention to it, but I've kind of had enough, and this is kind of a way of not really being as present in our bodies, in ourselves, in our activities. So somewhere between that hyper alert, ready for danger stage, and the complacent, yeah, I can't deal with this anymore. Somewhere between those places, we want to be in there and toggling ourselves and staying in touch with people who are more, if at all possible, like us than not. So there's lots of things that we can do about that as well. Okay, so we have been saying for some time, I'm sure you have, I have, things have to change. We look at our government and we say, it's really messed up. Things have to change. We have to change our president. We have to change our way of gridlock in government. We have to change the education system that's not working, how much universities cost, whatever healthcare, whatever systems we've been looking at, we've been saying for a long, long time that things need to change. But when we say that, we imagine that knowledgeable people, powers that be, genius minds, next generation thinkers will come up with solutions to these problems and that things will change. We imagine sometimes we say it'll get worse before it gets better, but we imagine with hope and with faith and with new rules and new laws that things will change. What we don't or didn't necessarily imagine is that things would collapse before they changed. That's not something that we typically imagine. We think that, okay, right before we get to that point where you fall off the bridge, we'll come up with a solution and the infrastructure will be repaired in some way and we'll go another direction. But what we're seeing now is that although things are not in collapse, they are in crisis, they are in disarray, and it's pretty much everywhere we look, and it's pretty much all around the world. There isn't anyone I know who's not impacted currently by whether it's getting their kids to school or not being able to do that, and homeschooling not working, or whether it's economically and jobs being affected, or whether or not they might graduate from school, from university. And so it's pretty much everywhere, being able to travel to other countries, being concerned about health. So this is where we are right now. And this is the way it's going to be for a while. So what it's going to look like for a while is that we're kind of in this gap called crisis, or navigating during crisis. And in a gap, you're no longer in where you came from, and you're not yet able to go or even know where you're going. So you're in this gap. It's a place. It's not like it doesn't have a location. We are here. I'm in my life. You're in your life, and we're interacting together. And things are sort of working in a not working kind of way right now. So that's what it looks like in the gap. A gap is a place that doesn't yet have answers. It doesn't yet have a far-reaching vision. You can see a little beyond tomorrow. You can see a little further. Maybe we can see into next year. We can't see very far ahead right now. And that's because we're all in this gap. So a gap is not necessarily this dark place, and it's also not a place that has clarity and understanding and cohesiveness. So it's kind of a place where things begin to fall apart a little bit, but they're all still existing. So there's sort of a safety net around this. There's at least a guardrail around us. We've been in places like this before, but not to this degree. And sometimes we need to kind of remind ourselves a little bit about some of the other things that we have gotten through and how we got through them, and what we did and what we felt. How did we get into this gap? In some ways, I want to say that it is a natural place for us to be in order to grow beyond something that became very big, very solid, very black and white. It doesn't come apart as well. Its pieces don't come apart as well to be rearranged into something else. So near the end of an era or an age, as those things happen, when it's this solid, concrete solid, ideas are concrete solid, religions and what they believe in, separation between, religion and science, and some of these things are sort of solid. They have to be broken apart. And in order to do that, we have to allow that to happen. And if we're not the one breaking it apart, one of the things that we can do is to rest in that gap. So that's where we are right now. It's kind of a natural thing to happen at this time, and we will emerge from this gap as well. And you'll kind of know when we do, but it's going to be a while. It's going to be a while. There's going to be, light and shadow play while we're here, and things that we say to each other, we're all in this together, those kind of platitudes in some ways that we say or acknowledge to each other. It is somewhat true. I think that when people say that, they don't always believe it or they don't always feel it, but sometimes it feels good to say that. And to a certain degree, as a civilization of people, as human beings who find themselves at this point in history, this is where we are, and this is our outlook. We are looking from this gap as far as we can see, and we'll need to adapt and change, adapt, be at the effect of different things that will happen for a while. We may not completely feel empowered during this time. We might not feel completely conscious and knowing and empowered and sure of our next mode, of our next place or decision. We may need to rest in indecision, in not knowing, in exploring, in letting go. All of these things are characteristics of a gap. So they're not characteristics of you personally. So if you find yourself saying, I've never felt this indecisive about things, I've never so not known what tomorrow would look like or whether I was looking forward to it or not. I've never been so unsure about my job or relationships or whatever it is. These things are all characteristics of this time and place in history and of a gap. And so it's not you personally, and that's really important to remind yourself as well, even though it will affect you as it does. So let's get into a few specifics here, and we'll take it a little bit subject by subject and see how we're doing. I suppose what's on everybody's mind right now is COVID, is the virus, right? I don't go anywhere, I'm sure you don't either, without a mask or a face shield, or without people looking at each other and wondering what's next and is it going to get better. And one of the things that inspired me to have this talk today is when it seemed like we were turning so that things were going to get better, and I thought, okay, there's the new normal around the corner, and we'll be looking at this in hindsight for the next talk. And then this resurgence that happened, especially here in the US. And that confirmed more than anything that, we are in this, and we're going to be looking at things from this point of view. And I thought it was time to have this talk. So the biggest questions that I've received from people that submitted questions before this talk is about vaccines and what can we know about this. So yes, just like you, I explore what is being shown or revealed about a variety of the different vaccines that are being brought forth and how soon that will be. So the first ones, and there's going to be a variety of what's the word I'm looking for? Introductions, a variety of introductions of different possibilities based on different theories and different tacks that the researchers have gone to put forth to study. And the first of these is coming soon. I'm wanting to say within the next couple of months, you'll be able to hear that some trials have gone very well. Some case studies have. There's people who have volunteered themselves for these already, and some of the trials have gone very well. So you will hear the first of this within the next couple of months, and I can't tell you, I'm not specific enough to know. I don't know which company, I don't know which version of the vaccine, because that's the first one. I see about 5 of them actually being introduced that have promising results, that have shown all the things that need to be shown enough so that it can be introduced or sold to the public, at least in limited quantities. That's going to be the big thing as well, is how to get these things out to the public, how to have as much quantities. And then I want to say to you as well that there is depending on the vaccine, the best probabilities right now is a 60-40 that it will work, that it will work as a preventative, and that it will work to diminish the symptoms of those who have been infected, and that it will be safe, and that there will be less side effects. Of the ones that are there now, the side effects are so similar to what is produced by the virus that it's difficult to tell if the vaccine is working or not. So it's a little bit like homeopathy might work. And you give yourself a small amount of bee venom in order to resist the venom of a bee sting. So right now, the side effects of these are moderate to significant. And so that brings about a whole other aspect to consider. If the vaccine works, but the side effects are on the severe side, so much so that patients need a good amount of health, then do we want this? Do you want this? How many people want to be the first to receive this? What other side effects that have not been studied? And the problem with this is, as we know, that this is being rushed through. There's lots of money being thrown at this. The best minds and people are being given the opportunity to work on these and to bring these to the market, but it's being rushed through. So what I want to tell you is that the vaccines are coming soon with limited success, some success, limited success, anomalies, side effects, and things that we don't yet know about, limited quantities. So from that standpoint, in some ways, what we see as the great numbers of this virus, the virus itself will diminish alongside or about the same time as the vaccines are coming available. It's going to happen around the same time. And so when is this going to begin to diminish? It's going to be a little while yet, but the weird thing is that just the way it grew and grew and grew in numbers, and then it dipped a little bit, and then it came back up again. When it goes away, it's just going to be gone. It's all of a sudden going to just be gone. And I don't even know how to explain that correctly, except that almost like you wake up in the morning and no one's talking about it, and you wake up in the morning and people are being released from the hospital, and you wake up and somehow there's other news to consider. We're talking about climate change, and we're talking about government and elections, and it just seems like all of a sudden the whole world at once is just done with this, almost like it happened in our minds more or before than it happened in our bodies, or at the same time. Somehow we moved, beyond this threshold that we're toggling back and forth now. And at some point, either the fear diminishes about it, or just the idea that there is a vaccine and that it's coming, and that the idea that things are going to be normal again, maybe there's such a release within us that we drop the idea of this fear and the whole fear of how the virus is changing our life. And so it's done, at least will appear to be. So that looks like really good news. And I want to stay with that and keep it as good news, because if we don't look at things positively, and as we are going to get through some of these times in our life, we could get mired deeply mired in this circular place of things are just getting worse. However, because we're in this place that I described to you, this isn't the only thing that's going to happen. This isn't the only virus. This isn't the only virus that can cross from, you know, animal or plant to human. Other things like this will come about now, and in less ways than we will have the foresight to see or to stop. And it's in our it's sort of in our human DNA not to take things seriously or seriously enough, or to think it's happening over there and not over here. So we are going to be looking at other things. They might not be viruses, coronaviruses like this, but they are things that in their own way could be deadly and could affect certain parts of the population. So maybe we can just kind of leave it at that for now, but I don't want to leave you with the idea that we need to be fearful about just this. And I don't want to tell you that just because we're done with that, we are so done with everything and everything is going to be the way it is. This sort of like danger time, infectious time, it's sort of going to be the rest of this decade or so. It's the whole decade. The whole decade we are going to be in and out and through of looking at different things that are strong conditions that affect our health, things that affect our immunity, things that affect our ability to overcome disease or even simpler things. We might find that the flu, which is, you know, can be in some people dangerous enough, that those things also become in some ways more dangerous than they have been, that common colds last longer than they used to, more than that, you know, 3-day cold that gets you down. And other things as well, you know, allergies that won't go away or are no longer seasonal, outbreaks of some kind. I think not long ago there was some kind of an outbreak of measles and things. So things that have gone away and have been off the radar for years will come back in limited ways, but they will come back. Because these are things that happen at the end of an era as well. Things come back for us to look at again, for us to review. So potentially things again like measles and polio and things that have been eradicated, increases even more in things like malaria and just difficulties, things that have to do with insects and things. And so, and I'm not saying these things to bring alarm, and there's nothing much we can do about it other than be as safe as we can and take care of ourselves the way we do. But we're looking at this decade, for instance, and so I want to be clear that what it might look like is all of this. So healthcare becoming, as it's already been, very important, and so important that that for most people, healthcare is something that's difficult to come by, whether it's good doctors or universal healthcare or what we need. And so there will be an increase in corporate, I'll call it corporate buy-in. We already know that to some degree. We know that big pharma is involved in healthcare and the insurance industry and in hospitals, but we're going to see that now to a much larger degree. So medical, technological, immunological, all of these different factors need money. They need research dollars, they need facilities, they need an influx of energy and young people to study. And so where do we get that? Governments don't have the money to invest in these kind of things right now. So the money then has to come from someplace. It will come from, it'll come from the corporate people, the same people that sometimes we love to bash You know, we love to bash Amazon and some of the other big companies, Google, and so they will be heavily invested in healthcare and in results-oriented healthcare, in which technology and how to reach human beings and how to bring things to human beings and how to change these systems. So, like it or not, over the last couple of years, we've talked a lot about corporations starting their own cities, starting their own universities. You will see over you'll see over the next few years, very soon, that there will be a co-sharing where the corporations buy into the larger universities that you know, not the state-run ones, but for at least the private universities, and beginning their own as well. Because without as much tuition and at the rising costs of education, universities will not be able to support themselves. So in order for that to continue as well, it will require, again, an influx of money. And that will come, excuse me, from the corporations investing, in some cases completely buying, co-sharing universities. And that will change everything. It'll change admission requirements. It'll change courses of study, subjects. We will be looking at hybrid degrees. We'll be looking at worldwide online universities, virtual campuses that provided by Google or Apple or Amazon. So this is a direction that we are going in now more quickly than it looked at before. This is where the money is. This is where the minds are, the technology is. And whether you like it or not, or think that things should happen at a small local level, right now, it won't happen that way. Right now, it's going to that really big pie in the sky, big holding areas. And so here's where we're going. I'll say a little bit more about education in a little while as well. In terms of healthcare as well, merging a lot with technology and with some of the things that are happening in our medical field as well. If more of the money is going to the research and into bringing things together for immunology and some of these things that we're looking at, less is going to be going toward things like cancer research and other ways that that money was being funneled into some of these things. Interestingly enough, although less money will be going into, say, cancer, there will also be less of some kinds of cancer, particularly the ones that were receiving a lot of money for study. So it will be seen that there isn't necessarily a correlation between how much money is thrown at a research facility or a study or even something that has epidemiological proportions of growth in our culture compared to what's happening. I guess what I'm trying to say is if we put all of our concentration on cancer for a while, cancer is increasing. If we put all of our energy into immunology and viruses are increasing, cancers will be decreasing. So the correlation has to do with our interest, with our involvement, with how things go, with how much attention is poured on something, and our bodies respond to that, not the other way around. It's a strange thing. It's a strange thing. Our minds and our cultural mind, our group think mind has sort of a mind of its own in that way. Sort of a way of knowing what direction the culture needs to go in to further the human population. So those are other courses of study. So in terms of our bodies, we now know that we have successfully replaced hearts and lungs, and we have hearing implants. We have specific kinds of contact lenses, that corneal transplants. We have done a lot with our bodies to transplant and replace pieces of our body in ways in which artificial means, technological means have replaced what is natural. So we're going to continue to move in that direction. Seems like a few months ago on the Facebook page, I think I put something in there. I think I shared an article about how implants to help, implants that could go either between, kind of like in the web of your finger here, implants that could go here in your wrist that would hold all of your medical knowledge, medical history, your records, and in case of an emergency, that a lot more could be done for you faster if you had this small implant, and that it would be easily read by the 5G technology that we're very close to walking into as well. And when I put that article there, I was surprised at how many posts I received that were a backlash to that. Well, that'll never happen, not in my lifetime, not in my body, or over my dead body, or all kinds of comments like that, which really surprised me because of all the things that we're doing already. And I thought to myself the other day, what if, with this whole COVID thing going on, what if someone said to you, look, here's this safe little implant, and if you put it here in your body, you don't have to be worried about COVID ever again. Here's your immune system right here. It targets your immune system, and you are, forever protected from this. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Would you say yes? Or would you say, oh no, over my dead body, like some of the comments that I saw? So what's interesting is that some of these thoughts that we have are situational, where we might say, no, not ever, I don't believe in implants. And then we have something like COVID that affects the whole world and is lethal, we could say, and then we'll say, sure, I'll take the implant. And so that's how we cross some of these thresholds. We don't always think we're going to cross them, and then all of a sudden we're there. All of a sudden, if it's life or death, or the whole world is doing it, then we cross these thresholds and we're at the next place. And that's how some of these changes in this thing that I call, what's new and what's next. This is how some of these things come about. All of a sudden, we're there. Something is triggered, and we make the shift, and we go for something that, a few days ago, we would have said no. So in terms of medical, this is where we're going. It may very well be that when we imagine a vaccine, we imagine in our old-fashioned ways of thinking, we imagine, we're getting a shot in the arm, we imagine whatever it is, our old ways of thinking about what a vaccine looks like. What if a vaccine looks like a small implant that circulates your body, targets your immune system, strengthens it, protects it in some way? And we may be looking at something like this, if not for this particular thing that we're going through, then for the next one. So here's what we need to look at. And you need to ask yourself as well, are you prepared? Are you prepared to go there, or will you not? You're going to stay in the kind of old belief system of the old way of healing things, or the old ways in which the medical profession, which is now becoming as well biotechnology, as it interacts with our body. This is where we're moving to. We're moving to having more artificial things, parts of our body. And I think even maybe you've read about it as well. Elon Musk, one of the great geniuses of our time as well, has been creating implants, neurological implants, to help a variety of issues that way as well. So let me pause for just a little bit there And kind of we're at that place here. So let me pause a little bit and see if you have some questions to share. If you do, try and keep them as relevant as possible, or at least do kind of like global questions and not on the personal side, which is hard to do on something like this that's for everyone. And you can chat your question to Pablo, or tell him that you have a question that you'd like to ask, and he will unmute you, and we'll take a few questions. So, sure. One of the things along the lines of, as well, with some of these illnesses and diseases that we talked about, is that in terms of tolerance, you've probably seen that we have people in general. When I say we, I say the general population. We have less tolerance for people that are not wearing masks. We have less tolerance for people that are not standing 6 feet away. There's less tolerance because we feel a little bit fearful, and the decisions that other people are making are contributing to our level of discomfort. And so as we become less tolerant as a population, you will see that unfortunately we're going to become less tolerant of almost everything else. People who are smoking and haven't figured out whatever, that affects their immune system, and that maybe they'll be taking up room in a hospital that someone else deserves. People who have diabetes and didn't take care of themselves in a certain way. And we're going to start to be that same intolerance that we see sometimes in social media. That's really not good. As we look at things, we become intolerant of other things because now it's looking in some way like it's encroaching on our life, or our freedom, or our ability to relate to the world safely. So we need to be careful with this as well, because this is definitely a trend, a not nice trend that we are moving towards as well. We need to see each other as family, as community, as yes, in this together. So do watch for that. Watch for it in yourself, and in others. Course correct when you need to. So let me look at a couple of questions here, since I see them on chat now instead. So I see a question here that says, did we sign up? Did we sign up for this when we incarnated in this lifetime, or did this just come out of nowhere? You know, sign up is kind of before, if you are someone of a theory that we know somewhat about the life that we are coming into, then yes, if you want to call that signed up for this, yes. It's hard to imagine ourselves signing up for challenges or difficulties. So it isn't something that happens. We don't get like a menu and a list and say, yeah, I'm down for that. And yeah, I think I can handle that. And like, no, not that. So it doesn't happen like that. But our makeup, if you take all of our atoms and particles and everything that we have ever been as we have flowed through the universe, and that's if you do agree with this theory of reincarnation, and I'm certainly not saying that anyone needs to. But if you follow that theory, then all of those atoms, particles, memories, associations, karmic movements, if you want to call it that, desires, all of that weaves itself together into a garment that we call this life, this body, this kind of agenda. So from that standpoint, yes, we knew we would walk into this or be subject to this or in some way be interacting with this. What we don't know, because it's so much dependent on how we lead our life, is what that will look like when it comes about. So we don't get a whole view and an outcome of what this lifetime is going to look like. If we did, there would be no purpose to having it. So the purpose in having this is, how do we respond to life? Given that we have a body and a family and all the things that go along with a life. How do we respond to life? What do we learn? What do we discover? What do we teach? What do we share? And all of that is what life is about. How do we move from the far reaches to the center of our being? So from that standpoint, yes, we signed up for it, and how we respond to it now is new. It's novel. And it didn't come out of nowhere, but these things, if it wasn't this, it was going to be something like this. And there will be other things like this. This is the time that we're in, as we said. And your other question I see here is, how quickly will state universities fail if not joined with corporations? So I think more that there will be, depending on how things go, if they don't make the adjustments more quickly to virtual learning, which is working in a mediocre way right now. I believe that some of the colleges, universities, they may merge one with the other. So you may see less of them, or you may see some that are able to operate on a limited physical basis and others that have switched completely to virtual. I do want to say that when I say virtual university, that there will be huge, with corporate help, there will be huge improvements in how we do virtual talks. Here we are on a flat screen. You know, I'm looking, you're looking, and we're on our computers, iPads, whatever what we're on. And as the necessity for meeting in this way, as opposed to physically, because of all the different limitations, whether it's travel or disease or anything else, there will be a huge jump, a leap in how we do virtual things, including, you know, having to maybe wear some of those goggles until they become smaller and smaller and not necessary, so that you are in a room with other people. A lot like, you know, if you can even think back to Star Trek and how they used to do the holodeck, whatever they called it. So you are in an environment, you're in a learning environment that will duplicate what your university affiliation looks like. If you were in whatever classroom A112, you will have a virtual environment that looks like classroom A112. And when you switch to another subject, instead of walking across the campus, you will click on something else that looks like whatever, geology building, whatever it is, and the classroom will look just like a classroom that you have known before. So huge leaps in how we do this to improve the conditions and the culture of learning are coming, as well as enhancements like, let's say it is a geology course, and you'll be able to virtually transport yourself to an on-site place where it will very much seem like you are meeting together on site someplace. And this is very close in the future as well. And what is accelerating it is how we find ourselves now. People have whatever we call it, you know, Zoom fatigue or whatever it is. What seemed like fun and exciting to meet everybody this way got boring really fast. So we need to enhance that. So, so big changes, yes. It will be more difficult for other schools. Other schools don't have as much vested interest from corporations and funding, so we'll have to see what to do about that. I want to throw the word out, micro schools and micro learning and other ways of doing things are coming, and we'll see if we have time to talk about that today or not. The negative aspects about the vaccines is kind of what I said earlier, that some of the side effects will be in some people, not in everyone, and they won't even know why. In some people, it will be almost as bad as getting the virus itself. So, or that it could compromise other parts of the immune system. There's things that we just don't understand about it. And unfortunately, there won't be any other way to learn about it other than by human trials. And, you know, there are a lot of people who are happy to be, I'll say, a guinea pig. A lot of people are just willing to take that course. I don't know what makes some people more interested in doing that. There are people that participate in many different case studies of different things. and they are more than willing to volunteer for things like that. And so that is where we will find out a lot about this. But we need to be careful not to only think that the only way we can get through this is a vaccine. But we're doing this because as humans, we need something to look forward to. We don't know how not to be solution-oriented, curious people. And and we latch on to things. So we have latched on to a vaccine is the only way through this. And so right now, that's where all of our attention is going, is the vaccine will fix it. That's what the news media is telling us. That's what elected officials are telling us. They're telling us it's happening, it's on its way, and we're using that to look forward to. I think I may come back to a 5G question. Let me see what I don't do in the second half. Looking here. Most people today don't trust large corporations. It looks like people will be forced to accept their products only out of fear for their lives. Is there a possibility of a real change in the attitude of corporations towards people in a more humane directions? And are the owners of the corporations capable of this? That's a great question. So we don't trust corporations. They are who they are. They are entities. They are huge entities. They are huge, powerful entities. They have many, many different agendas, most of which would not benefit most of us. They benefit the corporation. They benefit the shareholders. They benefit the investments and future well-being of the corporation. So we are the ants on the ground floor coming and going from the corporation with a little piece of whatever, you see the ant pick up 1,000 times its weight and go back and forth, and that's us. We're little ants going back and forth with our little piece of whatever, back to Amazon to buy something, and back to whatever. And we know that we're doing that, and we know that we're caught in doing that, and we don't like it. And sometimes we think it's an alternative between the corporation and the government. The government, if we look at the government right now, we don't feel any better about that. We think, believe, and are pretty sure, and can probably confirm that the government knows who we are, what we believe in, what we're doing, whether we think we're important enough to be spied on or to be tracked or anything like that. Our numbers, who we are, is counted, looked at, and everything else. And they don't necessarily have our best interests in mind either. It's a whole other agenda. So we are sort of caught between these two giant entities as people, as citizens living in cities wanting to contribute to our world. So to answer your question, is there a possibility of real change? Yes. And the reason for that is because the governments can't do what they're doing well. And the corporations, as they get bigger and bigger, and as they now branch out into healthcare, health technology, universities, education, space travel, everything else that they are branching into, they also can no longer do that well. And so something will happen that will not necessarily break them up, but that they will have smaller divisions. And within those divisions, and as these corporations get bigger and bigger, what is making them bigger? People like you and me. And so not all the people that join these entities are part of that big agenda. Some of them say, I don't have the resources to do this. That's where the resources are. And maybe I can affect change from that standpoint until it's available somewhere else. So yes, although we can't say completely we can trust these entities, that is the direction that we have. We don't have a lot of other choices right now. Philanthropists donate to universities, philanthropists, billionaires, you know, so we have the choice of the government or corporations or billionaires who have or don't have their own agendas of how to do things. And this is where we will see change. Once change starts to happen, once we're beyond this gap, and once we can see a little further, then we will have an opportunity to say, this way, not that way. No, I won't take that money. I would rather accomplish things in a different way. But while we're in that gap where we can't see very much further, this is what it looks like for a little while longer. I hope that kind of answers the questions. Let's see, we'll take another question here, and maybe we'll take a break then. How do you feel freedom of choice will be impacted? Do you sense that there will be less freedom to choose a vaccine and implant? When societal impacts do you see from freedom of choice? So freedom of choice is a really strange thing right now. We have even people who really believe in freedom don't believe in freedom in the same way. Freedom doesn't mean the same thing to everyone right now. And, you know, the perfect example is the face mask example right now. People are very polarized about whether it's a good thing, the only thing, whether their freedom of choice allows for choosing this and being around others or not. So is it freedom to do something? Is it freedom from having to do something or being around other people? So yes, the societal impacts. Do we truly have the freedom to become protesters? How far does that freedom go? What are we allowed to say here or there? What are we allowed to say in Hong Kong? What are we allowed to say in Moscow? What are we allowed to say in Washington, D.C.? And is it much different anymore? For the countries that really have thought of themselves as meccas of freedom and democracy, we are seeing that these things are not necessarily true. So we are seeing a suppression of people, we are seeing a suppression of opinions, a suppression of facts, and inflation of things that may or not be correct information, misinformation, misdirection, and all of these things are affecting our own thoughts of freedom. What does that freedom mean to you? Does freedom mean to you that you can carry a gun wherever you want? Does freedom mean to you that for me to be free, everyone else needs to wear a mask in this environment? So these things are what is impacting our society now. And along with everything else, we are being forced to look at these things as well. What is your idea of freedom? And is that someone else's idea of freedom? And so we will see more of a separation, unfortunately, whatever it is, whether it's political affiliations, the separation of the haves and have-nots, the separation of later on it could be something of people that have a physical university degree versus a virtual degree might not be looked on as well. So these comparisons of everything that's happening at all levels of our culture and our society and everything that we are evaluating, everything I would say is in crisis mode now, meaning that change is imminent. Change has to happen. It has reached a point where it can no longer go on just the way it is, and we don't know what direction it will take, but something is imminently to happen. Let's see. Let me say, let's take a 5-minute break or so. You can take a 5-minute break. Maybe you need to get a restroom and get a drink or something, and then we'll answer a few more questions and look at a few more subjects, and we can spend some worthwhile time together. And if you have any other questions during this break, if you want to chat them in or check in with Pablo or anything like that, we'll see what we can get to. And you can let me know if you like doing these things, and we'll do them a little bit more often, maybe quarterly or something. Okay, right back.